Hello folks, and welcome to this presentation on quantitative literacy and the quantitative literacy value rubric training. This is for faculty members involved in the phase 2 implementation of our QEP. On behalf of Dr. Arnold and myself, we want to say thank you so much for your participation in this QEP, because if it wasn't for you, we would not have a successful QEP. So this presentation will serve as an introduction to design workshops that we will schedule at the beginning of the fall 2021 semester. These will be scheduled the first week that we're back as faculty before classes start. And the purpose of these design workshops is for you as faculty to refine the assignments that you plan to use within your Phase 2 courses. Now, those Phase 2 courses were identified by program leads in the associate degree programs here at the college. So again, this will only affect associate degree programs, and your lead faculty member, program directors have already identified those courses. And again, these will be implemented in the fall of 2021. Now, whenever you want to do that in the semester, will fall back to you. But again, it will be designed within a specific course within your program. And again, with this training, we want to provide you with the quantitative literacy and the value rubric training that you need to help you with the implementation of those Phase 2 courses that will happen during the fall 2021 semester. And further, there will be a discussion of the QEP timeline presented by Dr. Arnold at the end of this presentation. And again, Dr. Arnold and I really appreciate your support of our QEP, because if it wasn't for you, we would not have a QEP. So at any time you have questions, comments, concerns, please do not hesitate to contact us and let us know. So why are we doing this training? Well, the purpose of the training is to review the QEP with you, provide an overview of quantitative literacy in order to best teach it in our classes, introduce a quantitative literacy value rubric to you, and discuss what's next in our implementation plan for the QEP. So what is QEP? Well, QEP stands for Quality Enhancement Plan. In other industries, it may be known as quality improvement, quality assurance, or quality control. But in higher education, we call it Quality Enhancement Plan, or QEP. The QEP is a required component of our accrediting body, which is SAC-COC, and the QEP is focused on outcomes related to student learning or student success. So what is Mountain Empire Community College's QEP? Well, it's Get Amped, applying mathematical principles to everyday decisions. And if you look in the upper right hand corner, this is our logo for our QEP, Get Amped. How was this topic chosen? Well, after reviewing institutional data, it showed us that pretty clearly that quantitative literacy and problem solving were areas of need. So what was this institutional data? Well, it's our stage data, and stage testing that is given to students when they first enter the college and when they leave the college before graduation. What is STAGE? Well, it's a general education assessment. Generally it's a tool assessment of student achievement that helps to ensure that graduates are prepared with competence necessary for employment and or civic engagement. And these core competencies were first established by SCHEV, and then they're tweaked a little bit and added to by the VCCS. So we at Mountain Empire Community College have 6 core competencies, from communication skills, critical thinking, civic engagement, professional readiness, quantitative literacy, and scientific literacy. So as the data showed us from the stage testing, that quantitative literacy was deficient compared to the other 5 core competencies, pretty significantly deficient. So that was an area that we felt the college needed to move and work on improving our students' achievement in quantitative literacy skills from that. So in fall of 2020, we implemented Get Amped with our Phase 1 courses. Now, you've heard me talk about Phase 1 and Phase 2 courses now. Phase 1 courses are those courses that students typically take in their first semester. It's usually your general studies, your ITE 119, STV 100, But it's your English, your social science, your humanities, your natural sciences, and mathematics. So those courses. Phase two courses we kind of gear toward your first, second semester in the student's chosen program. And again, remember those courses have been selected by the program lead or the program director, and you should be informed if those are your courses and you need to be designing assignments for those courses. So, in order to ensure that our graduating students are proficient in the area of quantitative literacy, our students will encounter different aspects of quantitative literacy in each semester of their degree program. A question I always get asked is, in the programs, does that mean every single class within that semester have to have an assignment for quantitative literacy? And the answer is no, but at least one of your courses or one of your classes within that semester needs to have an assignment related to quantitative literacy. And like I said previously, in fall 2020, we began our phase one implementation. Phase one were those classes that students typically take in their first semester. That's mostly your general education, ITE 119, STV 100, those kind of courses. So, all those phase one courses focus specifically on calculation and interpretation. But for phase two courses, we need to focus on application analysis and assumptions. Now, with that said, there's no reason why you can't go back and use all four, because you may have an assignment that's already out there within the course that you've selected that will cover all four of those. And it's perfectly fine to use calculation, interpretation, application analysis, and assumptions. But specifically for phase two, what you do minimum, what you have to have is application analysis and assumptions. To give you a example, my phase two course is going to be pharmacology, and I do have a problem where I have a physician gives an order to the respiratory therapist to give a certain dosage of medication to a child. Well, with that, the student is going to have to perform some calculation interpretation to calculate the correct dose, interpret that that's the correct dose, do an analysis if it's not the correct dose, and then make an assumption of what they need to do with that drug, either call the physician or not give it or whatever they need to do with that. That's up to the student to determine that assumption. But like I said, phase two courses, you have to, as a minimum, your assignment has to include application analysis and assumptions. And Dr. Arnold will discuss those more in detail later into the presentation here. But before we get into those two aspects, let's think about quantitative literacy in general, or general. So, what is quantitative literacy? Well, during our literature review for the QEP, we ran across a couple of definitions that we really liked and thought that it pretty much summated what our QEP is. The first one is from Elrod, who states that quantitative literacy is the application of basic mathematics skills to the analysis and interpretation of real-world quantitative information in the context of a discipline or an interdisciplinary problem to draw conclusions that are relevant to the students in their daily lives. Goes back to the statement that math is not just math, or math is just not for a mathematics class. We use it every day, whether it's time management, whether it's calculating to if we can afford to buy a new car or buy a new home, whatever the case may be. For students, how to pay for tuition, how to get books, how to make it to school, find a babysitter, that kind of thing. It's just using these complex interdisciplinary problems the students are faced with and how to draw a conclusion from that using quantitative literacy. The other one was from Henry Polak. She was visiting professor of mathematics at Columbia University. He stated the heart of quantitative literacy is real-world problem solving, the use of mathematics in everyday life, on the job, and as an intelligent citizen. And I think that sums it up because we're we're working on quantitative literacy skills and developing those skills to improve the student's overall problem solving ability, which employers ask for all the time. I always kind of fall back on healthcare, but everything that we do in healthcare is being able to take and analyze lab values, numbers, being able to formulate a diagnosis from that, and then come up with some type of medication or therapy to help the patient with that. So, we need those good problem solving skills, which is based on quantitative literacy skills, especially in healthcare. So, what do these definitions have in common? Well, quantitative literacy involves real life situations. In other words, outside of the classroom. So, the students have real life situations they face on a daily basis, whether it's buying new tires for their car, having to pay utilities, having to pay rent, having to have the money to pay for a babysitter, whatever the case may be. So it takes quantitative literacy skills for those students to be able to solve problems in their real life situations. Then quantitative literacy involves problem solving, and problem solving is multifaceted. Quantitative literacy skills is a component of that, but also is scientific literacy, so is critical thinking. So quantitative literacy involves problem solving. So part of quantitative literacy skills you get will ultimately help you with your problem solving. And then quantitative literacy involves the synthesis of several skills. And as we learn with our value rubrics, so several of those skills, including interpretation, calculation, application, analysis, assumptions, communication, representation, those are some of the skills that will come together and synthesize to improve the student's overall quantitative literacy skills. And again, quantitative literacy is not a separate skill in or of itself. Rather, it is infused in mathematics and indeed most areas of curricula and everyday life. So why should we teach quantitative literacy? Well, teaching quantitative literacy skills can help our students answer real-world questions and address problems they will face in their daily lives. A great example is time management, thus becoming stronger, more responsible students and ultimately stronger and more responsible employees. Many of the new and future jobs we see today require strong critical thinking and problem solving skills. So teaching quantitative literacy will help build the foundation for improving the skills in critical thinking and problem solving. And there is a considerable wage premium for workers that have strong quantitative skills today, leading them to more job security and a more stable income, thus making our students and graduates more successful. So in summary, as you can see, quantitative literacy is not a subject that could or should only be taught in mathematics courses. Instead, it is a skill that we should embed and emphasize across the curriculum. So in your course, as Phase 2 faculty, you will emphasize the aspects of application analysis and assumptions. And to do this, you will have to create an assignment that addresses these two components. And that assignment will be scored utilizing the Quantitative Literacy VALUE Rubric.
To assess student work in quantitative literacy, we'll be using AAC&U's VALUE Rubric. The Association of American Colleges and Universities Valid Assessment of Learning in Undergraduate Education rubrics are a tool to assess students' authentic work across fields of study to determine whether and how well students are meeting specific competencies. One thing that you'll notice about this rubric as you look at it a bit further is that it's not necessarily program or department specific. It's something that we're going to be able to use across the college. The rubrics were developed by teams of faculty across the nation in different disciplines. And as of December 2015, the rubrics have been accessed by more than 70,000 individuals from almost 6,000 unique institutions. And the excellent thing about that is that we are able to compare our students' work in quantitative literacy to student work across the nation in the same area. For the QEP, we're using the Quantitative Literacy Value Rubric because it's a valid form of assessment. Many of you most likely utilize rubrics in your own classroom, but just to refresh, rubrics really allow us to score student work using a consistent set of standards. So for the QEP, we want to make sure that our students are meeting specific competencies and are proficient in certain areas of quantitative literacy. Also, the great thing about the rubric is that we're going to be able to compare student scores across semesters and across courses. Most importantly, we can use what we learn to improve. So if we see that there is a bit of a deficiency in a certain area, we can work to correct that. This training specifically is for Phase 1 faculty, and what that means is that your course is one that students typically take in their first semester of their program of study here at Mountain Empire Community College. Now, we know that sometimes students will take courses out of order. However, what we did was we looked at the program pathway to determine courses that were typically taken in semester 1, and those courses that have been selected are being called our Phase 1 courses. So for Phase 1, what we're focusing on is calculation and interpretation as it relates to quantitative literacy. Now, if you've looked at the quantitative literacy value rubric, you'll notice that there are 6 domains on that rubric, 2 of which are calculation and interpretation. However, again, during Phase 1, we're just focusing on calculation and interpretation. These 2 domains are explained a bit further on the following slides. Now, when you get onto Canvas to actually use the rubric to assess student work, or if you're using this in a Word format or format of your choosing, you will have the whole rubric available to you. However, you are not required to assess the other rows in that value rubric. The first part of the value rubric that we'll be looking at with Phase 2 is application and analysis. With this one, the student is able to make judgments and draw appropriate conclusions based on the quantitative analysis of data while recognizing the limits of that analysis. With this one, you really want to ensure when you're looking at student work that the student isn't just repeating the data. Oftentimes when you're looking at something like this, that can be kind of the default. The student will want to tell you again what the data are saying instead of telling you the application for that, so what can be done about it. In creating a good application and analysis question, first of all, you want to make sure that the assignment you're implementing will allow students to receive full points in the application and analysis category. So looking at that row that was on the previous slide, you want to ensure that the assignment that you're creating would allow for full points. So you want to ask them to apply. You want to ask them to recognize their own limits. You want to look specifically at those items. So for example, the below question would not be a good question because it doesn't ask them to draw a conclusion. The sample is, what is the difference in salary between those who completed an associate's degree and those who completed a bachelor's degree? With that one, what we're really asking for is a calculation. So the student would probably just respond with a number since you're not asking them to apply that data to a new situation. The below question, though, would allow a student to earn full points in the category. So the sample is, what advice would you give to someone who is considering furthering their education with an associate's degree? Now with that one, you would want the student to look at the quantitative data that you've provided or that you've asked them to look up, and they would need to draw a sound conclusion based on the data. Now with that, drawing a sound conclusion is key because what they're saying, the advice that they would be giving, would need to make sense given the numbers that they are provided. The next aspect of the value rubric that we'll be looking at in Phase 2 is assumptions. Now this is one of the more difficult aspects on this rubric. For this one, the student would need to demonstrate the ability to make and evaluate important assumptions in estimation, modeling, and/or data analysis. With this one, and you can see this from that first column in the value rubric, which is below, the student would need to explicitly describe assumptions and provide compelling rationale for why each assumption is appropriate. Now, just to think about this in terms of assignment formation, you would want to ask the student specifically to do this. As you can see above, this does require a significant amount of awareness and metacognition. So an effective activity to lead up to this might be something in metacognition, where you ask students to think about their processes, where they become aware. So if they're looking at data, they start asking themselves, What was the population here? What were the circumstances under which this was collected? Those types of questions would help them become more aware of the assumptions that they've made when analyzing the data. With the assumptions category, just like with the other one, you want to make sure that the assignment you're implementing will allow students to receive full points in the assumptions category. So you'll want to look at that first column of the value rubric and ensure that you're asking students to do each of those items so that they could achieve that highest score. With this category, in a nationwide analysis of value rubric scores, students often didn't demonstrate these skills of assumption because they weren't explicitly prompted to do so. So this is not something that students may default to and do without being asked. Oftentimes with application or analysis, some students may just do it because that's how they think. With assumptions, most of the time students will not do it unless you explicitly ask them. So that's why we want to be very careful and intentional in our question formation. The below question would not be a good one. So if we have based on the differences in student performance on an attached chart, would you recommend that students earn an associate's degree at MECC? Again, we're not asking them to evaluate their assumptions there. However, the below one would be a good question. Review your response to the application analysis question above. List 2 assumptions that you made in the analysis of the data in the chart, and explain how these assumptions shaped the way that you interpreted the data. And this really ties into that overall idea of quantitative literacy and asking our students to think critically about quantitative data and to understand the limitations of that data. Just some notes on understanding the rubric. First of all, make sure to score in whole numbers only. You don't want to give scores like 3.5, 3.6, anything like that. Again, make sure that the assignment you've created addresses both calculation and interpretation, and that's something that we will be focusing on a little bit further in the design workshops. We'll get together and ensure that the assignments do clearly meet those areas. But this would be a really good time to look back over your own assignment, just to kind of workshop it on your own before we do that in groups. The only time we should give a 0 in a row is if the student did not meet or address the dimension. The italicized text within each rubric section is only meant to help or provide examples. The student doesn't have to necessarily meet the specifics of that text if applicable. So here we're going to talk about how to incorporate your Phase 2 QL assignment into your class. You'll want to implement this in your class fall 2021, and you will keep it in your class until summer 2025. You will really want to make sure to preface your QL assignment with pertinent discussion. We want to make sure that we're teaching the QL skills we're assessing before giving the assignment. Ideally, these skills will be emphasized throughout the course. So I would situate the QL assignment halfway through the semester or 2/3 of the way through the semester. That way you give yourself enough time to lay the groundwork that's stated below. So first of all, I would want to tell my students what quantitative literacy is. I want them to understand that quantitative literacy does not include just calculation. There are other aspects involved. I would also want to show my students how to pull up or find credible data. I would also want them to know what it means to be credible. I would want to explain application and analysis and demonstrate those skills, and demonstrate how to identify one's assumptions and how those assumptions impact analysis. Now, those last 2 items, as you can see, would be excellent items for classroom discussion because you could model these skills and have students go through these exercises with you so that they kind of train their brains to do this before they start doing that on their own. Now, when you do this, you can provide video lectures to students. You can do other assignments or readings that prepare students to succeed. You can include discussion boards or even small assignments relating to application and analysis and assumptions before you have your official Phase 2 assignment. You can situate your QL assignment as you see fit in your course, although I would recommend fitting it within an existing unit. You don't want your QL assignment to seem like it's just been added to the class. Instead, you want it to fit in, as these QL skills are something we want to emphasize as important across the board. So if I already had a unit on argumentation, my QL assignment may fit in well there. Your QL assignment does not have to be heavily weighted within your course. You as the instructor choose whether this is a high stakes or a low stakes assignment in your class. And I've done it both ways. I have one class that I have a QL assignment as the final exam, but I have another one where it is a smaller assignment that leads up to an essay. It's really up to you to see how this assignment, based on the assignment that you create and implement, fits in best. Again, we don't want it to stick out. We want it to flow naturally. So that being said, it could vary by instructor and by course layout. The assignment, though, should be required. Do not make this an extra credit assignment or an optional assignment. This is something we do want students to be required to do. You will be scoring your students' work using the QL value rubric that is embedded in all Canvas classes. Instructions on how to do this will be provided in fall 2021 at the design workshop, and we also have a video that can walk you through this as well if it's something that you want to refer back to. We'll also show you how to score using that rubric. If you're not having the students submit their QL assignments on Canvas, you will need to submit hard copies of the QL assignment, the students' work, and the marked rubrics to Ken Tucker in the Division of Arts and Sciences at MECC. Now note there, we do need copies of the students' work as well, not just the graded rubrics. If you are using another digital method of quantitative literacy assignment delivery, please send a digital file containing the student work and the graded rubrics to ktucker@mecc.edu. Now, if you are embedding this class on Canvas, you do not have to send us separate files via email or snail mail of the student work and printed rubrics or anything like that. Instead, we'll be able to pull all of that from Canvas. The only time you have to send us either hard or digital copies is if you are not using this Canvas embedded rubric and having the students submit on Canvas. So what's next? So again, you will implement your assignment beginning fall 2021. Each summer, beginning in summer 2022, we'll analyze QL assignment performance data for all Phase 2 classes. So with that, we'll just look at how students performed in applications analysis and in assumptions in all of the classes that the Phase 2 assignment was implemented in. Out of the courses selected each year, we'll select 4 to 5 classes, so around 100 students work in total for holistic grading. Now what that means is that we will get a copy of the student's work and we will associate it with the instructor graded rubric, and our holistic grading team will score the work and we will see what the difference is in instructor grading and our holistic grading team rubric. If there's a large difference in the way that the holistic grading team scores and the way that the instructor scored, further instructor training on rubrics will be provided, or we will look at rubric wording, phrasing, applicability. Again, you'll want to start implementing your assignment in fall 2021. All like courses will utilize the same QL assignment. For example, all English 112 classes will use the same QL assignment. QL assignments will be approved in August 2021 after our design workshops. We will have those back to you shortly after. So by the beginning of September, you will have your approved QL assignment. Please be sure to allot time in your fall 2021 calendar for your QL assignment and related QL instruction. You will continue to utilize this assignment in your Phase 2 course through summer 2025. We will have design workshops in August 2021 for Phase 2 classes. During these design workshops, you'll work in groups to ensure that your QL assignment effectively assesses a student's abilities in application analysis and in assumptions, using the definitions of those 2 items from the QL value rubric. The goal of these design workshops, also called charrettes, is to ensure that one assignment is chosen per course and that the chosen assignment meets the required dimensions of the QL rubric. Submitted assignments will be reviewed and approved. They will then be placed on the QEP webpage in the QL assignment repository. Lastly, thank you so much for your commitment to this QEP. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to email us. We hope that you all have a wonderful school year, and again, we appreciate you. Thank you.